Can anyone explain me what the heck does this sentence mean? Performance measured by using industry standard benchmarks. What is industry standard benchmarks? Anyone? Has anyone agreed? Is this Geekbench? Is that what it is? Is it GFX Benchmark? Is it Blender? They're all industry standard benchmarks. But which one did Apple use? They're not telling us. In fact, it gets even worse. Whether you're Apple fanboy or Windows fanboy, one thing I'm sure we can both agree on. If there's some dodgy marketing or lying, we can be upset because it's not what what they say it is. And I do have some bad news for you. Apple has lied. And this time, I am pretty sure of it. Now, I did make a video about it previously. It's got a lot of views. And one thing that I didn't have time, or maybe was a little bit confusing, what people were saying, oh, this is performance per watt type of thing. So if you don't know what I'm talking about this live event here. If you haven't seen that one yet, or if you don't know what this is, basically this graph over here is the dodgiest graph I have seen in any of the presentations anywhere. I don't know how can someone just put something like this in there. It's just so wrong. I'm gonna explain it to you all why this is so dodgy. But do you know what isn't dodgy? My sponsored segment from Adorama. Hey, thumbs off the screen. This video is sponsored by Adorama, the family-run business since 1974 with the #1 focus on customer satisfaction. When shopping online for your creator tools, I highly recommend checking out Adorama and the huge stock of electronics. Whatever you're looking for, most likely they've got it. Computers and components, GPUs, yes, GPUs, photo and video and studio equipment, and much more. Why not save some money and buy high-quality used gear, or trade in your old gear for a deep discount on your new purchase? And don't forget to check out the deal of the day section for killer deals on many products. Check out Adorama's store in the description below. If you're new to this topic, basically what Apple here is saying that their M1 Ultra chip, a GPU inside there, which I have over here, is better in power efficiency than an RTX 3090, which I have over here as well. So we're going to test this in a moment. I did put the ultimate performance to the test on the previous video. If you haven't seen that one, it's a very popular video on the channel. I highly recommend you check that out. But I'm going to go a little bit more in depth about the analysis this time. This time we're going to be really looking why this performance per watt kind of claim is perhaps a little bit false, and this graph should not have been in the presentation because it's very, 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 very bad. So this is the graph that Apple has published on their website, and you can find it, it's just there. I've got like 3 major things that I think are wrong about this thing over here. So first of all, I'm gonna look at the wording over here. What they're saying here is, at its peak, M1 Ultra delivers faster performance than the highest end GPU available while using 200 watts less power. So the wording is kind of put in a way which, let me know if this is you as well, that makes you feel that the M1 Ultra is better than the RTX 3090. And then what they're actually saying is that the M1 Ultra is better at the power efficiency in terms of performance per watt than the RTX 3090, which we're going to test in a moment as well. I know that in a way, if you go to the court and, say, look, Apple's lied, then I'm sure the lawyers and the judges are going to say, excuse me? It's just a very tricky or dodgy sentence. They haven't lied. But the thing is, us as end users, and that's what I thought as well, and that's what it makes me feel, or what you understand in a very short, quick glimpse, you understand that the M1 Ultra is better than the RTX 3090, which I just don't think this is very, very good. But if we think about the actual word scam more, then have a look at this graph here. What on earth is relative performance? Higher is better. I mean, what is it? They might as well just measure it in coconuts or relative, I don't know what. This side of the graph makes no sense to me because there is no explanation where these numbers come from. What does it mean? What is 150? This is roughly, M1 Ultra is 175. Where does it come from? Which benchmark is it? And also, why is this graph starting from this point? What happens before? Is it unable to go, from 0 to 30 watts? Because that looks very weird as well. Is there no, 0 here? This graph, if we just continue drawing this graph, does that mean that the RTX 3090 never goes below, 90 watts? That's not true either. So that's why this graph is very, very confusing and misleading. Second thing that I think is absolutely unacceptable is this. As you can see, there's a little 2 over here. If we click on it, it takes us to this page where you can actually read what does Apple, how did they get this benchmark? And this is basically where the lawyers have sat in the office and put this wording together so that it's not completely wrong, but not completely right either. Just some kind of gray stuff so that you can take it however you want it. So listen to this. Testing conducted by Apple in February 2022 using pre-production Mac Studio systems. So there's actually 2 graphs that this 2 is on. It's the M1 Max previous as well that was compared to the RTX 3060 Ti, and then the M1 Ultra that was compared to the 3090. So they're saying with Apple M1 Max with 10-core CPU and 32-core GPU, and pre-production Mac Studio systems with M1 Ultra with 20-core CPU and 64-core GPU. So what happens is usually pre-production systems aren't as fast as the production systems because they're still working some things out and so on. So when you get the actual retail unit, which I have over here, it should be faster than the pre-production unit, or it doesn't have any of the quirks or stuff like that. It should have a better performance. That's what you usually see in the industry. Performance measured using select industry standard benchmarks. Can anyone explain me what the heck does this sentence mean? What is industry standard benchmarks? Anyone? Has anyone agreed? Is this Geekbench? Is that what it is? Is it GFX Benchmark? Is it Blender? They're all industry standard benchmarks. But which one did Apple use? They're not telling us. In fact, it gets even worse. Popular discrete GPU performance data from testing i9 1200K DDR memory with RTX 3060 Ti. Highest and discrete GPU performance data from testing i9 12900K with DDR5 memory. They don't tell how much DDR5 memory was there as well, which doesn't really matter for the GPU benchmarks on their own, unless they did on purpose bottleneck it with the RAM, because they're not telling either of the systems how much RAM did they have, which is a little bit weird. And RTX 3090. They don't tell us if this is a Founders Edition or some kind of third party, or like an SI from Asus, MSI, Zotac, EVGA, whatever, RTX 3090. But let's say it's 3090. Performance tests are conducted using specific computer systems and reflect the approximate performance of the Mac Studio. Okay, so they're saying we've used these specific ones, which means kind of that you can't get this performance because we've chosen this specific one and it only reflects to the specific one. But then at the same time, what they're saying is it's an approximate performance of the Mac Studio. So it's not quite clear performance of the Mac Studio, but it's very specific performance of the computer systems. So this here tells you absolutely nothing, but at the same time everything as well. They're basically just saying, okay, let's just blur the lines as much as we can so that you can't understand anything over here. So that's what to me is very, very dodgy. They don't tell you how did they get the industry benchmarks. And then last thing, what I think is the most dodgiest of all is this here. I did beautiful Photoshop for you over here. So I basically draw a line on the M1 Ultra and the RTX 3090 here, so we can see what does it say on the power consumption of the watt. So they're saying that M1 Ultra at its peak, saying the max performance, it can pull 110 watts. Okay? It pretty well lines up with 110 watts. And that's what they're saying, this is the peak performance, right? The RTX 3090 peak performance apparently is at 318 watts, just under 320 watts, which is very, very odd because this is not the peak performance of RTX 3090. The performance of the peak would be 350 watts because that's the TGP of the RTX 3090. So they have somehow capped the performance at 320. We're gonna do the test in a moment and let's see how does this, if this is true or not. The very, very, very dodgy thing, if you don't know about this, is that this M1 Ultra GPU, the 64-core GPU, will never draw 110 watts. So Apple said, look, it can draw 110 watts, but actually none of the retail units in any of the benchmarks you can make will not draw 110 watts. So they've basically just absolutely botched this system. How can they say that this draws this much power and this is this powerful where none of the end users will get this power? I mean, you should be mad whether you're a PC or Mac user, because this is not right. And as an independent tester, no one's got me this. I've bought this into the studio myself so that we can test this, and I've got nothing against Apple. Honestly, that's why I bought this. I'm using Apple products, but what I'm saying is, if you do such dodgy marketing, don't do that. You're just deceiving yourself. You're shaming your own reputation, and I don't know why you did this. I'm just absolutely speechless. This graph uses 200 watts less power. It uses a lot less power, or actually, we'll see how much less power it uses, because what you're saying here, Apple, you're just lying. If you in your studio, in your actually like lab, can get these results, but no one can do it in real world, what the heck are we talking about here? You might as well just get the RTX 3090, put it in a lab and absolutely underclock it, undervolt it, and let some overclocker do absolutely awesome performance, and then show this graph here as well. But this is not real world performance. The real world performance would be anyone can go home, hit the benchmark, and then get those results, right? Am I right? Can we agree on this? So let's test this over here. So on this side, we have an RTX 3090 PC system. So we are running the RTX 3090 in here. This is the Asus TUF RTX 3090. It pulls 350 watts from the socket, like all the other 3090s really. No massive overclock or anything on there. The CPU, GPU, they're not like overclocked. The CPU in there at the moment is a 12700K, but it doesn't really matter because we're not going to use any of the CPU benchmarks. We've got DDR5 RAM over there, and this is really the Z690 Pro Art build if you haven't seen that one over there. Very cool build that we did for video editing. This is an absolutely killer build, and now when the GPU prices have gone down and you can get this GPU roughly around $1,500–1,600, something like that, this PC is very, very, very good performance. You know, for your dollars. So I'm going to leave some links in the description below if you want to check the build out. And on this side, we have the Mac Studio with M1 Ultra chip. This is the 64-core M1 Ultra, so like the best kind of GPU what you can get, and that's what Apple was talking about there as well. We have 64 gigabytes of unified memory, we have 1 terabyte of storage, and we have 20-core CPU. So there's two M1 Maxes kind of spliced together, and that's what you'll get on this side. So first test I want to do is blend the benchmark over here. I've got the M1 Ultra over here, just to show you that this is M1 Ultra. M1 Ultra GPU built in, total number of cores, 64 cores. There we go. This is the 64 gigabyte of unified memory in here as well. So we're gonna go next. We're gonna 3.1, this is actually, you know, M1 Ultra or Apple Silicon optimized benchmarks. We're going to go next. There's M1 Ultra, this is CPU, and this is the GPU. So now we're going to do the test on the GPU. And then I've got this kind of camera test set up over here as well. And we're going to see like the maximum power draw on this. We can see 75.6 watts, 78, 79, 81.6. Okay. The highest I saw the power draw over here was 81.6. As you can see, we have those scores in here, the Blender benchmark scores. Now we're going to do exactly the same on Windows, but just to show you something over here. For the Mac over here, we measured the actual power draw from the socket through that over there, so we can actually see what the real power draw is. Now on Windows, we're going to be looking at the actual hardware info monitor, which we can actually monitor some of the sensors inside, and we can see how much the GPU is pulling. I wish we could do that on Apple as well, because this system power draw also measures, for example, the fans will use a little bit of the wattage and so on, but this is the closest measurement we can do. On Windows, if we measured the actual like wattage from the socket, it wouldn't be quite fair because there's so much more cooling and fans and other bits that just take up the power. We really want to get the GPU power. So the GPU power there was 81.6. I've seen actually a little bit more used, but we're going to use 81.6 in there. But then here on Windows, if we just do a stress test of the GPU at the moment, you can see that where is our GPU? Here. This is RTX 3090 here. We're pulling 350 watts from the socket. So that's like the stock settings from the factory. Like if you get any 3090, unless it's more overclocked, it's going to pull 350 watts. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to use this MSI Afterburner. And if we're going to go and put 91% of the power limit, so 91% here. So we've just knocked like kind of 9% off here. We've pressed OK. So let's add that to the GPU. Now, if we do the stress test on the GPU, go back to hardware info over here. Can you see? We're pulling 318 watts from the socket. So basically, we have now matched this RTX 3090 with the graph that Apple was showing to us, just under 320 watts, okay? So we have done that now. But as you already saw, we're pulling the Blender benchmarks, which is very, very GPU intensive. We're not able to pull 110 watts from the system, not even close. And also if you consider the other bits and like the power supply inefficiency and other bits, then we're pulling much less. So we're losing a lot of performance on the GPU because Apple is just not letting us have it for some reason, or they've capped it or whatever. So now we know that we are actually pulling 320 watts from the RTX 3090 over here. We're going to go to the Blender test, exactly the same 3.1 Blender. We'll do the same test here. Select RTX 3090. We're going to start the benchmark, and I'm just going to zero the timers here so we can see what is going to be the maximum wattage of the RTX 3090 here once they have completed the benchmark. So our Windows system has completed the results here as well. We can see that the maximum wattage pulled here was 318.2 watts, right? And then our scores here, you can see the scores. So here's how we're going to calculate the performance per watt on these things. If we're going to take the score and we're going to divide it by the maximum power draw, what was pulled from there, we can see what is the points per watt. So per 1 watt, how many samples per minute did we get? The higher the number is, the better performance per watt we're gonna get. So let's do these calculations now. Okay, I've done the calculations here now. So if we're looking at the monster scene benchmarks over here, the 3090 got 2,840 points, which is 8.9 points per watt, or samples per watt, or let's just call them points as like the scores, okay? 8.9 points per watt, okay? M1 Ultra got 576.2 samples, and that is 7.06 points per watt. So 8.9 points per watt compared to 7.6 points per watt on the monster scene. The RTX 3090 is much better performance per watt. What can we say? Junk shop scene, performance per watt for the 3090, 5.1 points per watt, and the M1 Ultra, 3.3 points per watt. The RTX 3090 is massively better here on the junk shop scene. In terms of performance per watt on the classroom scene, 4.4 points per watt for the RTX 3090 and 3.28 points per watt for the Mac. As you can see in this Blender test over here, the RTX 3090 isn't just better in terms of the ultimate performance, which is so much better. It's like 4 times or even that better, if you can see the results over here, even more than 4 times. But it's also much better performance per watt in here, okay? Let's move on to another industry standard benchmark. We've got the RTX 3090 over here. We're gonna go to CUDA score over here, and let's run the benchmarks of RTX 3090, okay? We're gonna zero this as well to see the maximum power draw there. We're gonna go to the compute test over here. We're gonna go to M1 Ultra, and we're gonna go and do the metal score first because that's better optimized. And I know what you might be saying is, yes, but you know, the Geekbench 5 doesn't fully like kind of get the M1 Ultra to kind of spin up and use all the power, but hey, this is not my test, okay? Apple said industry standard benchmarks. Geekbench is probably one of the most industry standard benchmarks or synthetic benchmarks we can do. So that's why we're doing this test. Apple said this, I'm just comparing this. I wouldn't be doing this test. If I was Apple, I would actually say that we use some kind of video editing performance or benchmark over there that they conducted, because the M1 Ultra there is like very good at video playback because of the encoders inside. But no, they chose to go with the GPU benchmark. The encoders aren't actually GPU, they're separate from the GPU. There's GPU and then there's the media engines in there that do all the things. They chose to do the GPU actually like benchmarks. What the heck's going on over here? We've got errors here on Mac. So interesting, Geekbench must be having some kind of weird errors, because I'm getting the error on Windows side as well as on the Mac side. But if people say that, oh, the GPU on the M1 Ultra is not fully like kind of spinning up or getting the full power out, then we can say the same thing about the Windows thing. As you can see, only 242 watts being pulled rather than 318 as we have this capped to. So the Geekbench benchmark doesn't run even the Windows GPU like fully spin it up or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't fully utilize even all the power draw from even the RTX 3090. Now, we're going to leave this Geekbench benchmark over here. Let's move on to the next benchmark. We have the GFX Bench over here, okay? Even though being the industry standard benchmark, I think this is not really a good benchmark here either, just because this is gaming performance. But what this M1 Ultra is actually, you know, targeted to is creators. You're saying this is Mac Studio. This is all for creators. They don't say anything about gaming over there. But we're going to do this GFX benchmark over here because just to see what it's going to do, okay? Bear in mind, even though you see all of these screens here, I am not recording the screens internally. I'm using the video output and recording this externally. So all of this screen recording is not going to be bottlenecking any of these systems at all. Okay, we have completed the benchmarks on the GFX benchmark as well. And we've got the Apple benchmarks over here. And then we have the Windows benchmarks. Just a quick note over here. In a moment, you're going to see that the M1 Ultra actually drew more than 110 watts, which is like good news, right? Because Apple said, you know, 110 watts, and now we're seeing more than 110 watts. But because I am measuring this wattage from the socket or from the whole system power draw, I don't have the control of knowing how much of that power goes to the CPU, GPU, fans, RAM, anything else, power supply, inefficiency, anything else. So I don't quite know if this is literally 110 watts from the GPU power being drawn. So just like a note over here, which I'm happy to see that 130 something watts from the M1 Ultra, but I don't know if this is the GPU only. Well, for sure, there is some of it will be fans and so on. So I'm making this note just because I can't actually measure inside Mac OS just the GPU power draw rather than just the whole system power draw. So just so you know. If you look at the scores, then you can see that the 1390 versus M1 Ultra, they kind of blow throws which one is better in terms of like the overall scores. In the Aztec high tier, 1390 is better. 4K tier off screen, M1 Ultra is better. Then 1440p, they're very, very equal, only like 3 frames per second different. In the normal scene, we've got the RTX 3090 much better, and then in the 1080p normal, we've got the RTX 3090 much better as well. So the RTX 3090 is better in terms of the overall score, and the M1 Ultra is some of the scores is better. But now I'd like to mention that if you do calculate the frames per second per watt, so kind of how many frames per second do you get per watt, then yes, the M1 Ultra will be like better frames per second. But I would like to know who would buy a PC or a Mac or any computer which would be better at performance per watt, right? I understand if this was in a laptop, it could make sense just because, you know, your battery life is longer. But in here, both of them have a desktop, you know, unlimited power supply. I'd like to know who would buy a PC, Mac computer, which has more frames per second per watt. You just want more frames per second if you're gaming. But obviously, this is kind of random benchmark because these systems, I know like Windows system, it can game as well. But what I'm trying to say here is for creators, which Apple is trying to target this for, this makes no sense really. And if you're doing game development anyway, then like Unreal Engine 5 or so on, that would be much better with like RTX cards, which perform much better than the M1 Ultra anyway. So that's a little bit confusing thing here. But if Apple did use this and wanted to cherry pick this performance, then it would kind of be, you know, better performance per watt performance in this system. If we are looking at V-Ray now, which is another 3D rendering kind of benchmark, which you would use for, you know, creative applications. If you are a creator using V-Ray, something like that, then let's do a test over there. So here we have the CUDA and RTX. Okay, let's put this here, RTX 3090. I'm gonna get this up as well. We're gonna zero all these. Press start on the Windows system. We're gonna do exactly the same here on the Apple system. Now, why am I doing this benchmark? You might be saying because this is not optimized for the M1 Ultra or like the Apple Silicon. The thing is, if you are a creator and you're using this program, you need to know how good this is in this current like best benchmark at the moment. You're not going to be just using a different program because it's more utilized for Apple Silicon. If you're using V-Ray, let's have a look which one is better, you know, even performance per watt. So we're going to hit start here for that as well. And let's see the power consumption. Okay, the scores are in. The Windows PC got 2057 V paths, and we used maximum 317 watts, as you can see over there. And then the Mac got 485 V paths, and we use 91.3 watts maximum power draw from the socket. If we calculate the points per watts, then the RTX 3090 will get 6.47 points, and the M1 Ultra gets 5.3 points. So as you can see, even the RTX 3090 here is still better performance per watt for this application. Bear in mind, if you do use the 3090, you can use the RTX score there as well. So what's the conclusion over here then? So is this graph dodgy then, what Apple showed here, or not? So looking at this graph, I think this should not have been in the actual presentation, just because it's so vague, so gray. What on earth are they actually saying in here? What they want to get across is that their M1 Ultra is as good as RTX 3090, perhaps even better in things. But you'd really have to cherry pick the performance and go to a lab to make this work, to get 110 watts or something like that pulled from this thing. But if you actually look at real world applications, like the things that actually you would use the GPU for example 3D and so on, when we go to video editing, then there's other things, you know, involved there as well, CPU, RAM, and, you know, encoders and so on. So it's not GPU only. If you're looking at the M1 Ultra here, then you can see that the GPU performance here is not really better than the RTX 3090, even if we pull this to 320 watts in terms of the, you know, power limit. And at the same time also, it's not really better performance per watt. To me, that's just dodgy. I don't know how this comes across to you, but to me, that's just dodgy. If we're looking at like Geekbench or something like that, that's very synthetic and, like, you know, okay, it is industry maybe standard benchmark, but this doesn't really reflect the real world performance in an application. But, you know, if you get this for 3D, something like that, you're working on this, then the RTX 3090 is better performance per watt. But I also like to know which creator would be buying the PC that's better performance per watt just because it's better performance per watt, rather than just better and better value per performance as well. So you get more, you know, kind of performance for your dollar when going with RTX 3090 or something like that system. So to me, that it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, no creative professional that works in the field would say, do you know what? We're not gonna get these PCs that will be so much faster at rendering our videos or our 3D animation. We're gonna get the Mac Studio because it's better performance per watt. No, it's not. It doesn't make any sense, because even for business sense, you would think I'd get this one just because it would do it faster and cheaper, and we can make more money while using the RTX 3090s. It's very hard for me to get like head around why was this graph even like kind of presented. It's just absolutely insane to me. I mean, that's kind of the conclusion. I think this is dodgy. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Likes if you enjoyed it, subs if you'd like to see more, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks guys for watching. Bye bye.